Welcome to TradeTheNBA.com. This is John's reports for the 29th. Well, as we get towards the end of the month here, we're still just hovering right around our ABM yellow. We just keep dipping back and forth. But as usual, all the dips keep getting new attraction, and it becomes momentum plays, which makes for some of the runs pretty decent. I was posting one that came in earlier, and then we also had one at the wee hours after, wee hours for European time, but for local time it was just after the market closed. Another buy signal came in that's been operating through this time. Anyway, we're still having positive steel rising. Shakeout, we were talking about the potential for it increasing. We had it at 587, and then we moved up to 661. So rising, but just barely. We're looking at a 723 at the start of pre-market here at this particular time. So it's still going in the overall right direction. You can see from the NASDAQ standpoint, once it moved above the negative 13.5, that gave support to it. So it's held the green ABM throughout most of this, even though it's still weak from midterm buyers. And that it's just, we can see the red DOC tick up, as well as the same rising shakeout. So it's enough to hold it in place, but the ranges are still moving along. And here we have the euro devaluation of the US dollar. And while it's all positive extremes, even going back from all the way over here, there's still been no change. I mean, this is in a soft spot here, but needless to say, still very strong. And that's just because of the massive amount of US print comparative to the EU, which did considerably less, so they're not pumping as much, so you're getting a disparity between the two, and that's definitely supporting the euro. Oil, again, we know isn't going to do anything as long as the U.S. remains in this quasi-malaise, especially as the election heats up. It's just a lot of uncertainty. Turkey did agree to stop their exploration of oil and gas for the EU, so that relieved that, but you still have Libya heating up over in the European side, as well as other conflicts, Middle East. So there's still some things that are going to keep gold pressing, not to mention just the massive expectation of this hyper liquidity that doesn't seem to have an end, because you're going to extend unemployment benefits, everything else. And again, this is what I talked about at the beginning of this crisis, the unequal response. As far as state by state, it just economically, from a macro standpoint, this doesn't work. Fine, local areas will do better than some, but not going to be sufficient. The only benefit in the new package they were talking about was changing instead of just getting a set super bonus on the unemployment, they're going to limit it to 70% of what the salary was. That at least will provide some incentive for people to actually go back to work, as opposed to getting paid to stay and do nothing. The question will be, can you actually go to a place and perform a function? So from a 5K ticker standpoint, every time we got our magentas, we had pretty decent follow through to the downside. A couple of the adjustments that I'm making on that 5K with some of these signals should start to alter those, because they'll be more related to when we get, like in this particular case, a P2 with a dip below the orange, as well as the power mo closing below, because sometimes what we get within the current configuration is an uptick in Azure where the magenta moves above from the bottom, can also create false positives, as I like to say. The cleanest ones are like these, where we have that dip crossover with the rising Azure, as well as a shakeout above the negative 13, which usually gives us the strongest read, and that brought us all the way back up. We did produce some dips below the red line. It had to be refilled, which happened a little bit later in the day. In this particular case, we had the one that came just after the signal. We made it to the 100%, and turn around, boom, filled it all back in, created new ones. That led to a break. But that's where the adjustment I'm making on like these blues, where you don't have the dip of the orange and no cross at the power mode 2, eliminating those will allow that short mean to be maintained, at the same time capture this dip that comes across. So that's the adjustment I've been working with. This particular time here was the late morning buy configuration that developed right here in the post market on this nice little pop-up, and it's just kind of consolidated briefly through this. No real reset that has to be filled at this particular time. So I think we're just seeing the back and forth momentum plays, and like I said, they can continue to do this and keep pushing higher and higher. It's just a question, is that justified? If you're taking into account the amount of devaluation, it probably is, because the market is not going to accept a discount based on a dollar devaluation. It's going to inflate to take care of that, and that's exactly what it's done at this particular point without a corresponding either revenue or growth standpoint. So that's the trade-off. Now, when that equalizes, what will happen? Well, that still remains to be unseen because that hasn't happened like this before. So we're really going to be in some uncharted waters. We're looking forward to how interesting that configuration is going to be. But for now, we just keep playing the different momentum reads. Pretty close to having the setup ready that will be able to send out emails on the various color signals that have the strongest probabilities. So that'll be an option. You can always DM me if you're interested in having me add you on that test pilot of those signals coming through, because I think that will be kind of a nice way to have a setup where at least you're getting a notification. Likewise, then when I have the capability on it, I will also make it available in the regular programming so that you can just add the alerts, which would then you would just substitute your own email and it would automatically do the same, or provide you a text if you have it set up in your own messaging from TradeStation. But as always, I will keep putting up the details in the Skype chat and go over the unique and interesting setups as they pop on. As always, trade well. We'll talk to you later.